impact the Illinois 12 more than they impact, you know, California 4 congressional district. And what are some of those issues? Well, let's talk about the EPA. I mean, in 20 years, you want to talk about good quality, stable jobs. A job that provides you wonderful quality of life in Southern Illinois is a coal miner. And in 20 years, we've gone from 37 operating coal mines to 9 operating coal mines. We haven't run out of coal. Look at what we've done to the transportation industry. I mean, Southern Illinois used to thrive on trucking, rail, and river barges. I mean, like I said, our access to all these transportation networks, especially in the last 12 years, mainly because of there were some state policies, but a lot of federal policies have chased those jobs out of here. And so, from a federal level, I think you have to have a congressman that understands. You know, I'm not a dictator going there by myself that can wave a wand and fix it. But you have to work with people like John Shimkus, with Joanne Emerson, who came to Marion last week with us, with other congressmen that have the same types of districts to really focus on those issues. So I think right off the bat, to make Illinois 12 more competitive, you've got to roll back the EPA and other bureaucracies that harm our major industries, energy and agriculture. You have to have people that really address the tax reform situation, because that impacts everybody, but I would argue the federal taxes on top of what we see at the state level really impacts the people here in Illinois. And then finally, you have to have a congressman that will address a lot of issues people don't want to address. I come from, you know, the Metro East part of the district, and we have a well-deserved reputation for what goes on judicially up there. And you want to talk about something that drives businesses out of this area, and that's the tort situation. So you have to have a congressman that understands that, you know, they're not going to do everything, but how does public policy directly impact the economy and jobs? And I think as a congressman, as a person that operates businesses in this district, I think I know what those things are. I think I know how I can work with local legislators. We have great relationships with Republicans and Democrats, that we can try to impact state policy, while at the same time you can do things at the federal level that are not easy to do, but they're not a huge burden. I mean, especially if a Republican from Illinois 12 goes to Washington in the majority, we're going to be able to tackle a lot of these things. You know, Jerry Costello was in the majority for a while. Well, before Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, Denny Hastert was in the majority. Jerry Costello was in the minority. And then finally, we had a congressman down here that was in the majority for a couple of years when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker. But does anybody think the Speaker of the House during that period of time really cared about coal or oil or gas or the culture of Southern Illinois? Now we have an opportunity not just to have a congressman that represents those issues, but also be in the majority and can directly impact them. So the opportunity is there, and it's something that we should all be very excited about.
Jason, I think I read someplace that the Keystone Pipeline actually, does it come through a portion of the 12?
Yeah, no, there's two things. There's a Keystone pipeline that actually is in existence today, and then there's the Keystone XL pipeline, okay, which is the proposal. So the Keystone pipeline actually comes through Illinois 12. The big impact that situation has on our district is Keystone XL would come near it, but you know, at the northwestern tip of the district, in East Alton, Roxana, that area, you've got the Conoco Phillips refinery that just went through $1.8 billion expansion. Why did they do that? Which provided a lot of jobs. Why did they do that? Well, they were under the impression that with the types of oil that mix, I mean, there's different types of oil, there's different types of mixtures, and with the type of oil that was coming from the tar sands up in Canada, that refinery was going to have to be able to refine different product mixes. And so we went through the big expansion under the anticipation that this would occur, and now it's basically at a standstill, because unless Keystone XL gets approved, we're not going to see that coming through the Midwest. And we'll always have Keystone, and I know, I wish it would have named it something different too. We'll always have Keystone, but without the Keystone XL surge and that product and that inventory coming through, that refinery will not operate at full capacity. And that's obviously a huge burden. And it's just common sense too. I mean, the jobs that pipeline will provide, and forget the direct impact the pipeline has. Just the fact that we can get that fuel, we can lessen our dependency on foreign oil sources, we can bring down the cost of the pump. I mean, fuel prices doubled under this president. Now, do I say it's all the president's fault? No, but could this president sign a couple pieces of paper tomorrow, and immediately would you see a price in the cost of gasoline? Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that they won't do that tells me that they're paying more attention to constituencies outside of Illinois 12 than they are areas like this.
they hired great accountants, and so
Yeah.
they're able to find ways around tax loopholes. And so I'm just sort of curious about your tax policy in general, because to me it seems we have two goals we're trying to accomplish with tax code, which is to fund for government, for making sure everyone pays their fair share. And so when you have these two competing ideas, how do you resolve that? Because some people feel that some people should pay more, some people should pay less, but at the same time we're sort of one country. So if half of us goes down, we all go down. So how do you resolve that tension?
Sure. Well, first off, I could talk about tax policy all day long, but I don't want to put people to sleep. So here's what I would say. First off, I think we have to make sure that people are paying their fair share. And you know, I use example. I mean, if there was a very interesting article in, I think in the Wall Street Journal about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and what it talked about was General Electric's tax department and how huge their tax department is, and how it's staffed by a bunch of people who went from the IRS to GE. There are companies that have departments aimed directly at tackling their tax bill. Why should GE make $10 billion and pay nothing in taxes? It's breathtaking. I think Republicans and Democrats alike can agree that sometimes simple is good. And though I don't know if GE can file their taxes on a postcard, I guarantee you that the 75,000-page tax return they filed is probably a symptom of a tax code gone awry. And so what I would have proposed is a simplified tax code. I think we need, well, I mean, you've got your personal income taxes and your corporate taxes. So let me address the corporate taxes first. I think that we have to tackle the loopholes that exist. And the interesting thing about me is you can find papers that I wrote a long time ago, dating back to '05 at the Heritage Foundation, and things I worked on then that talked about the fact that the loopholes were being exploited. And both parties are guilty of this. I mean, both parties are guilty of this. The tax rules are being, it's just like when, you know, when the state bailed out the CME and Sears, who bear the burden? Well, small and medium-sized businesses in Illinois. Well, when GE doesn't pay taxes, who's carrying that burden? Well, we all are. And so we need a simple tax code. There's competing thoughts out there. You've got the fair tax people and others that believe in a consumption-oriented tax. You've got you know, flat taxers that are out there. I'm one of 435 out there, and then you've got the Senate, and you've got the President. So I'm willing to be very open-minded about how we address it. But I think at the end of the day, Americans agree the tax code's too big. The tax code needs to be shrunk, it needs to be simplified, and people need to be able to understand it. On the income tax side of it, a perfect example is 2 years ago, they presented a very common, I won't say simple, but a very common, typical American tax return of a fake individual, and gave it to the 30 most brilliant tax law professors in the country. And said, how much should this person pay in taxes? You know how many responses they got? 30 different responses. So when you take the 30 supposed most brilliant tax law professors in the world, and you give them a fairly simple tax return, and you say, how much does this person pay in taxes, and you get 30 different answers, the tax code is messed up. So I want to go out there aggressively. I want to make sure that we close a lot of loopholes. See, Democrats will attack me all the time because they say, well, you don't believe, you know, for instance, would you trade $10 in budget cuts for $1 in tax increases? Yes and no. Yes, I would. If that tax increase comes from closing loopholes from people that are avoiding paying taxes. No, if that tax increase comes from increased rates. We have an ability to increase revenue to Washington while lowering tax rates if we effectively close a lot of these loopholes, and that's what I would advocate. On the personal side of it, we have a regressive tax code. And the example I use a lot is a fairly common one. You have people say, hey, too many young kids are smoking, or too many people are getting in drunk driving accidents, or too many people are going to strip clubs that you see in the state of Illinois. So we have sin taxes, right? And the reason why sin taxes exist is because you want to prevent certain types of actions or certain whatever. You don't want people to do things, so you increase taxes on it, right? So you have politicians say, hey, let's increase taxes on tobacco products. Or you want to have politicians, Sheila Simon right now, she's the one, you want to increase the taxes on strip clubs or increase tax on alcohol consumption because people will quit doing those things. Well, okay, but then at the flip side, if you want to increase taxes on working and you want to increase taxes on investing through capital gains, or you want to increase taxes on saving through an estate tax, won't that cause people to invest less and work less and save less? Of course it will. And obviously we have a problem with that right now. So at the personal side of things, I want to create a tax code that incentivizes people to work more, that incentivizes people to save more, and that incentivizes people to invest more. And we have the opportunity to do that. There's ways to go about doing that. But the tax code we have right now doesn't do those things. So, and you'll hear a lot about the Bush tax cuts, and I get a kick out of them calling them the Bush tax cuts because the last president that actually extended them was President Obama. So, you know, it's a political season, it's a political year, so you get an election, you're going to see a lot of funny things. So at the end of the day, on the income taxes, on the personal income taxes, I want to see everybody paying a lower rate. Do I think we'll have a straight flat tax? I think it would be tough in this environment to get that. Do I see a very easy way to lower the number of tax brackets? Yeah, I think you're going to see that probably happen, especially if Republicans have a good year. Do I think you're going to see loopholes closed? Yeah, I think you're probably going to see loopholes closed. And the neat thing about that is we have data, and I like data and I like numbers, of Democrats and Republicans both that have shown, JFK did it, Ronald Reagan did it, other people have done it. You can lower tax rates. You can close loopholes. And when you do that, you actually increase revenue to government because you expand the economy. And so that's what we need to do. That's what I'm focused on doing. And I look forward to this election cycle because I think that's something that definitely separates the two parties, is who should have the money. I think the American people should keep their money. I think American businesses should keep their money. And when that happens, government's still going to get more money because they're going to be working more, they're going to be employing more people, they're going to be expanding. So, yes, sir.
One of the things that Reagan said was, we don't have a taxing problem, we have a spending problem. And I think that is part of our problem right now. How would you address some of the things that have been going on in the last 3 years if we had a Republican president that you were working with?
Well, I think there's a lot of things we have to roll back. I mean, anybody that's going to say there's not waste, fraud, and abuse in government is just not looking at the same government I'm looking at. I think in the last 3 years, I just read, I forget if it was American Family, I think it was the average American family had $200,000 in more debt dumped on them. Not personal debt, I'm talking governmental debt that eventually we're responsible for, we're the taxpayers, dumped on them in the last 3 years. At the same time they had that debt getting dumped on them, the last 3 years, the net worth of the average American family has dropped 40%, back to levels of 1992. We've essentially lost 2 decades worth of economic growth in the last 3 years. And I see, I'm an intelligence officer in the Navy Reserves. I see our debt, I see the fiscal situation that we're encountering right now, not just in terms of dollars and cents, but also in terms of national security. And I think that it's a real problem. I think that we've had a lack of politicians willing to really tackle that problem. No one likes to be the guy that says, hey, we gotta go cut the budget. I can't give you everything you want anymore. But you know what? Businesses have to tighten their belt. Families have to tighten their belt. And I wouldn't even argue government has to tighten its belt as much as it has to get rid of a lot of the things we've seen. I mean, we still don't know how much Obamacare is going to cost. We don't know. And they finally have admitted, well, okay, we don't really know how much it's going to cost. So there's a lot of ways to tackle debt, but at the end of the day, you're not going to just cut your way out of it. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to start cutting. You're going to have to start slowing the rate of growth. You're going to have to start cutting back on some things. You're going to have to probably eliminate some things. But while you're doing that, if you truly reform the tax code, and if you put in proper public policy that will spark the economy, while you're cutting to lessen that deficit level and lessen the overall debt level, you're also going to be increasing revenue. And hopefully that revenue isn't diverted to spend. Hopefully that revenue is actually diverted to actually tackle our debt problem, because that is something that has to get under control. Yes, ma'am.
You've talked about having a very transparent campaign.
Right.
In keeping with that, do you plan on releasing your tax returns at any point, or are you going to do that?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of like I was getting on earlier with like the bright shiny object thing. See, I think a lot of our elected officials, they like to depend on distractions, and quite frankly, they like to try to trick the electorate. And while they say, hey, Jason hasn't released his tax returns, what they don't say is, Jason has released, every source of income he has, everywhere he gets a salary. I make $51,000 at our Plummer company, it's my only salary. Everywhere where I have an investment, stock market, companies, whatever. Everything, every financial detail of my life is public information. It's readily attainable, you can get it. And they keep saying, well, he hasn't released his tax returns. But the tax returns don't show half of what my personal financial statement shows. And the only thing the tax return actually does show is exact numbers. And I've argued from the very get-go, I'm not an elected official. Those are just numbers. If I showed you my tax return, you wouldn't know where that money came from. If I show you my PFS, you know everything I have. And so the Democrats will try to trick voters and act like that's an issue. But, as time and time again is shown, it's not an issue.
Just if that's how you feel about it, is there a particular reason you're not then, or I'm just,
well,
if it's
I'd
not a
say there's
big
three.
deal?
I'd say three. One is if I release my tax returns, I'm actually releasing the financial information of other people too. And I'm the one running for office, they're not running for office. And I don't know, some of them are family, some of them are not family. And I feel that if I release their financial information, that probably not really be right to them. I think number two, I think that if I release tax returns, we're going to be talking about tax returns. And I haven't met a voter yet that cares how much I make or how much I pay in taxes. What they're really passionate about is the fact that they're not making money, that they don't have jobs. And, people have tried to talk about contraceptives, and people have tried to talk about this war on women, and people try to talk, especially at the national level, around these tax returns, and people try to talk about all these, look, we're not here to talk about those things. We're here to talk about how we get people back to work. We're here to talk about why you've decimated the economy. We're here to talk about your ethics situations. And I think that's a big thing, because once you do that, okay, here's my tax returns. Well, let me see last year's tax returns. Well, okay, here's last year's. Well, let me see tax returns from two. Here's my personal financial statement. It's every investment I have. It's every financial relationship I have. It's everywhere I drive any source of income. And the tax return is just numbers. So I would say those are, pretty big reasons why. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
First of all, you have my vote. I think you make a lot of sense in this upside down world. I think you have a lot of passion that really just makes sense. But I'm a teacher in Carbondale, so I'm kind of curious about what your views are on education. When it comes to in legislation, they're going to be. I think I'm a great teacher. I love my job. I'll do anything for those kids. I'm teaching summer school and make soup on Wednesday. But what's coming up in legislation is how teachers are evaluated. I know it's a very scary time for teachers.
Right.
Why would I want to be a teacher in a place that, it seems like it's running teachers away? So what are your opinions on teacher evaluations?
Well, I think education in my heart is like a lot of other issues. I think it's best at the local level. It's just like, Obamacare. I don't want, people in Washington, D.C. preaching to somebody here in Carbondale about healthcare decisions. I don't want people in Washington telling you here in Carbondale how to have to run a classroom. I would argue that across this country there's, such diversity. I'm not just talking about people, economy, industry, everything, you name it. And so, I think that in that regard, I like to see those things at the local level. That being said, I think teachers need to be held accountable. I think everybody needs to be held accountable. I don't think teachers would doubt that. I think that the education system should be structured and maintained in a way to make sure it's actually educating children so that when they graduate, they're armed with the tools and the resources necessary to compete in the economy that we're in, to provide for their families. So, are you referring to No Child Left Behind and the changes that's occurred there, or are you referring to a new specific piece of legislation?
Yeah, well, right now we don't know how we're going to be evaluated. It seems like a lot of the principals are going to hold a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of going to give us, they're in the works of legislation of what it looks like.
Okay.
So I know that our union is very strong in Carbondale, and right now we're going to a lot of meetings discussing what we want our congressmen to look at for the evaluation tool that they'll use for us.
And I would say I don't know the most recent legislation, if there's any out there. I know the original Little Child Left Behind bill. I know a couple revisions that have been made to it. Beyond that, I would say, look, I like decentralized government. I like things at the local level. I'm a federalist. I like states' rights. I like local rights. I think everything that can and could be treated at the local level be done so. So in regard to your specific case, I think you would see in me, if I were lucky enough to hold this office, I think you would see me fighting to make sure Washington, just like I want the EPA staying off the backs of our farmers and coal miners, I want them off the backs of our teachers, as long as teachers are performing. But I think that's something that can be taken care of at the local level in the same regard.
This is one of the nuanced questions about the tax code.
Sure.
Do you feel that there's a threshold that should be met to justify an estate tax, or do you feel that the estate tax philosophically is bad policy?
I think that the estate tax philosophically is bad policy. Now, are there ways to, here's why, mainly. First off, I think the estate tax costs us jobs. I think it deters people from saving and investing. Most importantly, I think it really harms our nonprofits and our charity sector, because what you see is a lot of that money that would otherwise be flowing into our churches and our charitable organizations and all that getting sent to Washington, and who knows what Washington does with that. I think the estate tax, I would gladly vote to abolish it. Now, I can tell by the hint of your question, you're saying, well, there's a difference between the family farmer in Murfreesboro and Bill Gates. There's no doubt there is, and that's a conversation that may be well worth having. But right now, I'm sick and tired of going to the Franklin County Farm Bureau, the Monroe County Farm Bureau, St. Clair County Farm Bureau, and running in farmers that say, well, I'm farming 600 acres. My family used to have 1,500 acres, but when my dad passed away, we had to sell half of our acreage to pay for the estate tax bill, and then we had to sell another few hundred acres for this and for that. What we really need to do is we need to inspire small businesses. We need to inspire medium-sized businesses, farmers, whatever they may be, to employ as many people as possible, to grow their business as much as they possibly can. And instead of spending so much time and man hours and dollars trying to create these structures to get around the estate tax and to pay as little possible tax and all that kind of stuff. Let's just make it simple and let's incentivize people to grow. And so, no, I think the estate tax is punitive. I think to a certain degree it's un-American. And, I think that a perfect example is here in Illinois. When we raised the corporate tax almost 50%, a couple years ago we raised the personal income tax at 67%. Those were such big numbers. People often didn't realize we also had a huge increase in the estate tax. And the number of family-held businesses that left Illinois immediately, and I can name off, brand names you guys would know, Rural King, these business leaders left Illinois. And now they're doing what they do best in other states. And so, sure, will the new estate tax increase some revenue to Springfield for a little while? Yeah, it will. But over the course of time, have we lost a lot of economic vitality here? Yeah, we have, because there's other states that have more competitive tax codes. So, no, I'd like to abolish the estate tax. I'm open to, ideas, because I get the gist of your question in regards to the different levels. But right now, the estate tax is very punitive, and I think it harms our economy, costs us jobs. Yes, sir.
I can tell you're philosophically conservative, and I applaud that. And even if the Republicans are able to take the Senate, you still have a Democratic president that you have to work with.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see yourself as someone from the Illinois 12, and also just as a member of the House and member of Congress? How do you see yourself working if this president is reelected? How do you see yourself working with this president? Because he is philosophically liberal. If you're philosophically conservative and he's philosophically liberal, there's going to be a clash there. So how do you try to resolve that clash?
Right. Well, I think if we take back the Senate, I think we're going to be dealing with President Romney, just numbers wise. But let's say that we don't take back the Senate. Let's say that we maintain our majority in the House, and let's say we have President Obama. I think that makes this race so much more important, because as I tell people all the time, you see some of the crazy stuff coming out of this administration while the gentleman is still running for re-election. If he didn't have a re-election to worry about, what would be coming out of this administration? It's quite frightening to me. In regards to how you work with people, I think that it's not just working across the aisles. I think something that's harmed IL12 and other parts of the state, actually, is the fact that our state delegations and our federal delegations aren't as close as they should be. And so when you're facing the dual headwinds from Springfield and Washington, you have to be addressing both state issues and federal issues. So I want to robustly work with state elected officials in terms of going to Washington and having Republicans and Democrats. You have to have people that have a track record. Again, some of those things I wrote, 6 and 7 years ago at the Heritage. When I was at the Heritage Foundation, our biggest problem wasn't the Democrats, it was the Republicans. We had a Republican president, Republican House Senate, Republican Congress, and we had some huge problems. And so you have to have people that go to Washington and understand not every Republican is perfect, and not every Republican idea is right, and vice versa with the Democrats. Now, I think that if we're dealing with this president, he has shown an inclination to not really working with the other party. If you look at almost every piece of bipartisan legislation, serious bipartisan, I'm not talking about naming landmarks, but I mean legitimate public policy, most all of the bipartisan stuff, the bipartisan bills that are sitting in the Senate because Harry Reid won't call them to a vote, that's all bipartisan stuff. The stuff that's getting killed from this administration, his budget, there is bipartisan opposition to Obamacare. There's bipartisan opposition to the president's budgets. There's bipartisan support for our jobs bills. There's bipartisan support for our ethics bills. And we've shown a tendency and an inclination to work with each other in the House. Now, obviously, is there a lot of conflict? Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you should be pretty darn focused on making sure your people get back to work. I think most of us are. And that truly is why I really don't understand this president. I just don't. I mean, Keystone XL, right? That shouldn't be a partisan political issue. And let's just look at it strictly from a political angle. Let's not look at it from, is it right environmentally, is it right economically? From a sheerly political angle, this president should approve that, because that will help him in Ohio and Pennsylvania and parts of this country where he needs help. And the fact that he still is killing it in a re-election year tells you how radical and how far left he really is, especially on some of these environmental issues. So, I come from the Madison-St. Clair County area. I've lived my entire life in counties in Illinois, which isn't the most Republican of states, in counties that are generally pretty dominated by Democrats. And I've shown an ability and a willingness to work with both parties while maintaining my principles, growing Republican numbers in the state legislature, in the county boards, and the county-wide elected officials of where I've operated. And I see going to Washington as a wonderful opportunity to continue to work with both sides while kind of driving the issues that I'm pretty passionate about.
My follow-up question is it sort of a pyrrhic victory if you're able to get everything you want in the House, if you know you can't even get into the Senate, much as a president? I guess my question is, at what point in time do you say, I want the loaf, but if I'm willing to give up 30% and just have 70% of the loaf, I can get to the Senate and get to the president? At which point in time do you say, I'm willing to sacrifice that 30%, or are you saying, I want the full loaf?
Yeah, well, I've always been the guy that, I'll take my 90% and I'll figure out later how to get the 10%. I've always been that guy, and some people will say, well, no, I'm not going to take my 25% and figure out how to get my 75% later. But, I think there's a limit. I think the important thing to realize, though, is with this president, we're not dealing with Bill Clinton. I've never supported Bill Clinton, but, Bill Clinton said, hey, you know what? The Welfare Reform Act, that actually helped people, and that was a bipartisan thing. The budget surpluses we saw. Listen, he worked with Newt Gingrich, Speaker of the House, to get those budget surpluses. Bill Clinton showed a willingness to reach across the aisle and work with people. George W. Bush, controversial guy to a lot of people. No Child Left Behind. George Bush and Ted Kennedy. Some of the Medicare and healthcare issues that George Bush really tackled. He was standing on stage with Democrats. I haven't seen this president stand on stage with a Republican, I don't think, in his entire administration. I think that's why I said, you know, it's so important that we hold the Senate if we don't win those other things, and hold the House majority if we don't win those other things, because it may not be about advancing every piece of public policy we can possibly advance at the legislative level. It may be trench warfare, Jason Plummer and John Shimkus against the EPA in Southern Illinois, while we're trying to stave off every piece of public policy we have to stave off for 4 years. I mean, that may be what it turns into, but we'll see. Got time for a couple more questions? Yes, sir.
In this upcoming election, a lot of people are looking at jobs and budgets and stuff, and I know that you have experience in the business world. So I was wondering what some of your specific accomplishments in that means that, you know, tells us, you know, that you're ready to face those issues in Washington.
Sure. Well, you know, my family has our Plummer company, which is where I work. But outside of that, you know, I've started multiple companies, real estate brokerage, real estate development, a lot of those things. And I would say that my biggest argument would be we've been growing businesses either together or on our own in a state that hasn't been too friendly to businesses lately. Fortunately, fairly successfully, you know. And when we employ people, it's like this gentleman referred to earlier, you know, if you work at RP Lumber, you know, you make a very competitive wage. You have 401k, you have profit sharing, you have health care, you have a job you can be proud of. And I would argue it's less about not just, hey, do you successfully operate a business, but is it a type of business that you'd be really honored to kind of put on a pedestal and say, you know, we think we don't just provide a business that provides a quality service, keeps customers happy, which is what businesses should be doing, but we also provide a business where I couldn't tell you how many families we have multi-generations working for, or how many employees we've had that have been there for more than 20, 25, in some cases 30 years, and we haven't been around that long, you know. We were started in '77, so it's not just the fact that I think we've, and look, things are tough right now. I mean, things are really hard right now. It's not like, you know, I tell people all the time, I don't think people realize the sacrifice, you know, running for office as it is, because I feel like in a lot of ways, you know, in a certain regard, I think you neglect your business. And it puts more pressure on people that are there. And I can tell you, when I'm in the car or late at night or early in the morning, I'm still working on my business. It's not just all campaign. But it's not just the fact that you still have it, it's the fact that you've done the type of things that businesses should be proud of in a tough environment. And I think we need those type of people to understand how to balance a budget, how public policy negatively impacts businesses and jobs, how to sign the front end of a check. And we don't have a lot of those people in Washington right now. And so, you know, I'm proud to say not only, yeah, we have businesses, but we take care of our people and we provide a good service. And I think we need politicians that may sound simple, but are pretty simple-minded to a certain degree. So, yeah, so you had a question too, ma'am?
Yeah, what's your thought on Obamacare? For being a business owner, I work for a local factory, and they do supply us with health care, and I know that when all this comes through, when we have to start paying lump sums for part-time employees that we bring in, I mean, it's going to be a real strain on a lot of the District 12 businesses.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm sorry. Well, I mean, first off, I want to see Obamacare in the entirety thrown out by the Supreme Court. And I'll get to healthcare in a second regarding some specifics there on Obamacare. You know, I think that's a perfect example of just the disingenuous comments and things that this administration has done. I mean, I remember, well, you know, if you like your healthcare plan that you're on, Obamacare doesn't change it, you can stay on it. Well, that's just patently false. I mean, what they've done essentially is they've created a program that eventually will force everyone into a government pool. And the way that they've done that, I mean, I can tell you as an employer that provides healthcare, I mean, healthcare for an able-bodied, you know, average everything person in the state of Illinois could run for anywhere from $6,000 to $11,000 or $12,000 a person, depending on, you know, a few different things. And I mean, let's take $8,000, which is probably about par for the course across an entire business. If you elect not to provide that person with health care, even though they're really happy with the plan and everything, you have to pay a $2,000 penalty to the government. So there's going to be a lot of business people that say, well, I can pay $8,000 out of my pocket to provide health care, $2,000 penalty and throw them into the government pool. Why? A lot of businesses are going to throw people into the government pool. And so those people are going to be removed from a plan that they like. They're going to go into a government pool. Now, we already know we have a shortage of doctors. We already know we have a shortage of nurses. We already know that there's essentially 3 different levels of health care that people like to talk about. You could have kind of a gold plate, Blue Cross Blue Shield private plan. You could have like a Medicare, type plan, and you could have like a Medicaid type plan. This administration and their Democrat allies have yet to say what type of plan this government plan is actually going to be. But when the CBO, which is not partisan, runs its numbers, it says, well, first off, if you dump all these people into this pool and you try and provide them with a Blue Cross Blue Shield type plan, the thing is bankrupt day one. It can't fund it. So then if you provide them kind of a run-of-the-mill, everybody that's on Blue Cross Blue Shield gets also pool and now they're on a Medicare type plan, they think that the plan can fund for maybe 8 to 10 years. And if you provide them a Medicaid type plan, it can probably fund somewhere between 20 to 25 years. But the quality of service people are getting, and the most important thing, even if you do that and you can't fund it for 20 to 25 years, they don't have enough doctors to do it. So, in regards to Obamacare, I kind of went off on a tangent there, I apologize, but I think that if we wanted true healthcare reform, and I don't think there's a person in this room that would argue that the healthcare system in America is not perfect. I don't think it's this horrible thing that some people like to make it out to be. It's not perfect. There could be a lot of fixes. Well, I think if we're going to fix the healthcare system, how do we go about fixing the healthcare system? Well, I think you're focused on 3 things. Access of healthcare. Does everybody have access? The quality of that healthcare, the cost of the healthcare. Now, Obamacare does not solve the cost problem. We've shown that it actually drives costs up. It hasn't solved the access problem because it's clear now that those people that like their healthcare plan aren't going to be on that healthcare plan, and it doesn't provide for a vehicle to make sure that everybody can get access to it. And then finally, the quality of it obviously decreases. So I think what I would like to see happen is the Supreme Court throw it out. If the Supreme Court doesn't throw it out, I'd like to be elected so I can go vote to repeal it. And I would hope that we would have a Senate and the President to help. Then, I'm not a no person though. If we're fortunate enough to get rid of Obamacare, why don't we actually address true healthcare reform? Why don't we go about tackling those 3 things that are better than a lot of people like to say they are, but could use improvement: the quality, the cost, the access of Americans across this country to healthcare. You go about doing that by tackling things that the Republican Party has been talking about for a long time. I hit on it earlier. Look at Madison, St. Clair County, Illinois. Look at the tort environment. The last 3 years, I've been blessed to have 2 sisters who've given me 4 nephews between them. And they live in a nice area. They live in Edwardsville, Illinois, Madison County. But they had to drive over an hour into St. Louis to have a doctor and to deliver their babies. Well, why is that in this day and age in the United States? Would they have to do that? One thing people don't realize, but if you're in a bad car wreck in Mount Vernon, Illinois, or in Pinckneyville, Illinois, or let's leave the 12th Congressional District, McLeansboro or Harrisburg or Vienna, where do you get treated if you have a traumatic injury? Cape Girardeau, Evansville, Paducah, St. Louis. You don't get treated in Illinois. Now, I would argue to you that people have actually died because of the healthcare situation in Southern Illinois. And I would argue that there's some trial lawyers out there that have driven our doctors out of this area. I mean, we've only got 2 neurosurgeons in the entire Metro East region. We just got both neurosurgeons in the last couple of years, and the only reason why we just got the 2 neurosurgeons was they admitted, hey, we can't afford to do this on our own. We can't afford the medical malpractice rates, or medical malpractice insurance rates. We can't afford to practice on our own. So you had 2 hospitals that hired them separately on their payroll. They're covering all the costs. They're providing the neurosurgeons to the community at a loss so that that service exists at that hospital. That's a broken healthcare system. So let's tackle tort reform. Why do we pay so much in health insurance? Well, because we have a closed market system. We need to orient our healthcare insurance system and other parts of the healthcare system with more market influences. There's such a disconnect in the healthcare industry between the provider and the end user that, that's how you get the $40 boxes of Kleenexes. That's how you get the crazy stuff, because people don't see the bill, they don't pay the bill, they don't know what's going on. And people say, well, healthcare costs are just always going to increase. It's high tech, it's research and development, it's all this stuff. And to a certain degree, they're right, but there's plenty of statistics out there that show that healthcare costs don't always have to go up. How much did it cost 10 years ago to have LASIK eye surgery? How much does it cost today to have LASIK eye surgery? How much did it cost 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever, for cosmetic surgery, a nose job, whatever? How much does it cost today? I mean, there are medical procedures out there. The cost has been driven down, and while the cost is driven down, you can get LASIK eye surgery in more places today. The quality of the LASIK eye surgery is much better than it was 10 years ago, and the cost of LASIK eye surgery has gone down. Why? Because there's market influences in that procedure, and we have to orientate our healthcare system so that there are market influences, so that there aren't these major hurdles and roadblocks like the tort environment of Southern Illinois. One last example, I had, and this perfect example, people, sometimes you just need to give perfect examples so people hear, but Clinton County abuts St. Clair County to the east. And I had a friend who's a doctor who lived about 2 or 3 miles in St. Clair County off the Clinton County border. He moved his practice, his building, 2 or 3 miles into Clinton. The whole move was like 5 miles on the same road from St. Clair County to Clinton County. His medical malpractice insurance, just by moving from county to county, went from $48,000 a year in St. Clair County to $8,000 or $9,000 a year in Clinton County. And he moved 5 miles. He's seeing the same patients, providing the same services. So there's a lot of ways to directly affect healthcare reform. I think we need healthcare reform. I think Obamacare would be horrible for the American people. And I think that I look forward to voting to repeal it, but it still exists when we win this race. And after we do that, all day long, I will be passionate about tort reform. I'll be passionate about introducing market influences into the healthcare industry. I will be very passionate about a lot of these things. Last thing I'll say, yesterday I toured Olin Brass Works. It's not the big Olin, it's a subsidiary of the big Olin that was bought. And they were talking about copper. I didn't know this. You learn things all the time, but copper actually kills germs. It's an person that was with me isn't here, and they could pronounce it, I couldn't, but it's an antimicrobial metallic whatever. But copper actually kills germs. And my point of it is they've got stainless steel everywhere you go. Hospital rooms, everything's stainless steel. And this guy has said, look, we've got equipment manufacturers that manufacture faucets and bed rails for hospital beds, and the little stands that the IV things roll around on, all this in copper. And it would actually bring down the rate of infectious diseases in hospitals, especially ICU units, by at least 60 to 70%. It would decrease the cases of staph infection by 35 to 40%. And the guy actually faces headwinds from Washington legislatively because of the impact, or because of the influence of the stainless steel in that industry. I mean, this is silly stuff here. I mean, let's have healthcare reform. Let's bring down costs. Let's tackle the issues for the American people. And if you were genuine and you went to Washington, D.C. with some good ideas, and you stayed focused on fixing problems and taking care of your constituents, and not how do I stay in Washington, D.C. forever, you could get a lot done. And Obamacare is a travesty, but our healthcare is not, and it's something that we need to improve on. So, I have one last question, and then we'll call it a day.
Sir,
started with you, will end with you.
I know that it sounds as if you've encountered quite a bit of opposition to what we come to know as Obamacare. And truthfully, and speaking to friends and family members, other members of this district, I have two. But you're saying that if the Supreme Court doesn't repeal it, you would hope to, once elected, repeal it and replace it with something else. There are two provisions of it that I think that are sort of more popular than the rest of it. So I was going to consider those. And those two are the provision that enables a child to stay on a parent's insurance until the age of 26, as opposed to what was 20 or 21, which personally speaking helped me very, very much. And the
And there have been Republican proposals, conservative proposals, whatever people draw. I mean, fiscally, actuarially, however you want to lay it out there, there are ways to provide high-risk pools at the government level while maintaining the integrity of the private system that we have right now that would be much more cost-effective than Obamacare and would actually still maintain a higher level of service for the people in the high-risk pool. So yeah, I mean, there's ways to do that, absolutely. I don't think anyone in America wants to see anybody go without health care. The question is, how do you most effectively provide those people with, I know you're tired of me saying it, but the best access, the lower cost, to the highest quality care. And there's ways to do that. You're exactly right. There are provisions of Obamacare that are more popular than others. The real reason why I want to see the whole thing repealed is because the way that the bill is actually structured, now that people have had time to actually read the whole thing, leaving some of it in place provides tentacles that just cause massive headaches. And the best way to do it is wipe the thing out and then attack these problems one and twosies and threesies at a time. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there are ways to provide the high-risk healthcare pools, make sure people with pre-existing conditions can still be treated, people with traumatic situations can still be treated and taken care of. Regarding the insurance for the younger folks, which I think you're going to hear a lot about this campaign season, because Republicans, I think, they got this war on women, the war on the youth, the war on
Not a fan of that verb.
all that kind of stuff. But that will be a part of it. And that's unfortunate. First off, I can't, as you said, keep a 26-year-old child on their parents' plan.
I don't look at a child, sir. I mean, it's their child, but I mean.
Right. No, right, that's what I mean. So, you keep a 26-year-old child on their parents' plan. I think that you have to not take them one at a time, because that's not correct, but you have to look at independent circumstances. And what you've seen already is most private sector insurance companies. One of the big was at WellPoint or Blue Cross Blue. Somebody just came out either early this week or last week that said that no matter what happens to Obamacare, we're going to keep that in place with all of our policies going forward. With WellPoint? WellPoint. Yeah. So I mean, you've seen the private. You've seen a lot of these things coming to an effect. Especially, not every part of Obamacare is bad. People want better health care. I think it's just a philosophical thought of how you get there. And so, yeah, I mean, there's ways to do that. Republicans have proposed ways to do that. Republicans were proposing high-risk pool solutions before Obamacare even existed. And, absolutely.
Well, it's good to hear you consider that.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate everybody being here. I said it quite a few times earlier today in some of my meetings, so I'll say it here tonight. I think this election cycle is the most important election we've ever seen. Now, every 2 years people get in front of you to say that. But I truly believe that you are really looking at two very ideological positions that come at opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think that we have a choice. Do you want to continue to go down the path that I think America was founded on and America has been operating on and continue to improve upon that path? Or do you want to radically change the way that our economic system exists, the way our healthcare system exists? What's going to happen to our military? I was surprised, especially up north, right off the bat after jobs, people say, well, what about the $500 billion in cuts to the military? These are very, very substantial decisions. I think that we have some really serious people that really want to provide some serious solutions, and this election cycle is an opportunity to get people into office to tackle these problems. I don't like the direction we're going. I think we need to defeat this president. I would love to see the Republicans take a majority of the Senate, and I think that at the end of the day, if anything happens, we have to hold on to a majority in the House to prevent the continued, I don't want to say attack, but the continued chipping away of our freedoms, of our foundation, of our economic system. I think you guys, by being here tonight on a Friday night, show that you guys also believe it's an important election. I appreciate you being here. I think that, I look at you all and, I don't walk into every town hall and say, hey, 100% of the people are going to vote for me. But I do appreciate the fact that you're here, that you now know where I stand on at least some of your positions. I hope you realize that I will always have an open door policy. And most importantly, I hope that you all leave here not as 25 people that are going to go vote in November, but 25 people they're going to talk to. Your friends at church, your friends at Little League games, your friends at work, your friends at the neighborhood block party, your friends, you know, at SIU Carbondale, wherever, so that there are other educated voters, and you guys turn out in droves, because I think that we need a lot of people out there working hard. So thanks for being here. I'll hang out if people have more questions, but I know it's a Friday night. You guys have other things to do. So thanks for being here.